For many of you, this is it. This is your last chance to make a fantasy football trade that can take your team from a contender to a champion. Let's talk about some players I think you should be trying to buy low right now who have fantastic playoff schedules, and some players I think you could trade away to get those guys. Hey, before I get to those guys, let me remind you, if you haven't tried Underdog Fantasy yet, now is the perfect time, because if you're watching this before Thursday Night Football, you can take advantage of this Joe Burrow new customer special. Only needs to go higher than half a yard tonight on Thursday Night Football. If he does that and you pair it with any other line or multiple lines, you can win up to 20 times your entry. And there's also good news if you're watching this after Thursday Night Football, because they have another new customer special on Sunday. Russell Wilson only needs to go higher than half a yard. I know Russell Wilson isn't cooking this year, but he can at least get more than half a yard. If you go to Underdog Fantasy and use our promo code ENDGAME when you sign up, not only are you going to get access to these new customer specials, you're also going to get a 100% deposit match, dollar for dollar, up to $100. Take the free money Underdog gives you, put it on one of these specials, and potentially 20x it. All right, let's start with running back buy lows, and I think you have to try to go out and trade for DeAndre Swift, especially if you're a team that knows you're going to make the playoffs. Maybe you're in first place, maybe you've already locked up a playoff spot, or maybe your team is just stacked and you feel good about it. Because DeAndre Swift has quite arguably, not even arguably, he has the best playoff schedule for any running back. He gets the Seahawks, the Giants, and the Cardinals to finish the season. Those are three smash matchups. He could absolutely go off in the fantasy playoffs. Don't be surprised if DeAndre Swift is one of, if not the highest scoring running back when it matters most. So if you're deep at wide receiver and you have a player like Garrett Wilson who's been coming on lately and you can go out and get a running back like Swift, I'd do it. I would also trade a wide receiver like Mike Evans. He's been great this year. If the team who has Swift needs wide receiver and is deep at running back, Mike Evans might get you Swift. Now, running back I've been recommending for the last couple of weeks is Javonte Williams. I know he had a nice game here on Monday night, caught a touchdown pass, but I feel like people still aren't all the way bought in on this guy, but you should be. He's getting crazy volume in this offense. He's catching passes, as we saw, and he also has a pretty nice playoff schedule. Sure, he gets Detroit in week 15. That's not fun. But if you survive that, or if you have the bye, he then gets the Chargers and the Patriots to finish the season. Those are two matchups that shouldn't scare you whatsoever. He's only going to get better as the year goes on and his knee gets healthier. I don't know if he has the upside of a DeAndre Swift type, but he doesn't require that when it comes to trading for him. I think right now, if you have a wide receiver like Amari Cooper, who's been good this year, but it's probably going to take a big hit with the rookie starting, if you can move him for Javonte Williams, I'd do it. I also move a wide receiver like Tank Dell. He has a lot of name value right now, a lot of hype. He's been good. If you don't need him, if he's just sitting on your bench, go get a running back like Javonte. And then it looks like we're going to see a second half redemption from Rhamondre Stevenson after looking like one of the biggest busts for most of the season. He's been pretty good here lately, but you really got to like him rest of the season. He has a fantastic schedule, and especially in the fantasy playoffs, a fantastic run of matchups. He starts against Kansas City, which isn't a great spot, but they're much better against the pass than the run. But then he gets Denver and Buffalo to finish the year. And you might think Buffalo, good defense, but they really haven't been, and they've really been bad against the run ever since they lost Matt Milano. Rhamondre Stevenson has pretty much taken over this backfield. Zeke is barely a factor. He's involved in the passing game again. So Rhamondre Stevenson could be one of these guys who started slow, but finished hot. And if you could trade a wide receiver like Terry McLaurin, who's, fine, a good wide receiver, but probably not going to win leagues, and get Rhamondre, I would do it. I would also be trying to trade a wide receiver like Puka Nacua. We don't know what it's going to be like when Stafford comes back, but he still has name value. People still remember the beginning of the season. If you could trade Puka and get Rhamondre, I do that. Now, a running back we haven't seen in a while is Kyren Williams, but he's eligible to return from IR in week 12. And if he does, he's going to be the workhorse running back here again, because Darrell Henderson, Royce Freeman, they really haven't shown anything. I'm pretty sure when Kyren Williams gets back, he's going to be the workhorse. And this offense is a good fantasy-friendly offense for running backs. Teams don't stack the box against them because they have Cooper Kupp, they have Puka Nacua, they have these passing game weapons. In fact, Kyren Williams is one of, I think, only two running backs who hasn't faced a single stacked box all year, and that's not going to change down the stretch. Now, I will say he doesn't have a fantastic playoff schedule. It shouldn't scare you, but it's also not a smash schedule. But the fact that he gets every snap, every touch, catches passes, means the defense matchup doesn't matter quite as much for Kyren Williams. And because we haven't seen this guy in weeks, his value has really plummeted. If you have a wide receiver like Tyler Lockett, kind of this boom bust, wide receiver 3 type that you don't have in your lineup week after week, I think he can get you Kyren Williams. As could a wide receiver like Jordan Addison. He's been pretty good with Josh Dobbs. Josh Dobbs has been great, so people are still buying into this passing offense. But you got to remember, Justin Jefferson's coming back. TJ Hawkinson is there. I sadly think we've seen the best of Jordan Addison. If I could flip him for Kyren Williams, I'm doing it. Now, another running back that has a fantastic playoff schedule, but is in an offense that isn't always the best for running backs, is Isaiah Pacheco. Yes, he's a good runner. He gets most of the work. He maybe catches some passes. He could potentially score, but the real selling point here is the schedule. He has the 8th easiest playoff schedule for running backs as he gets the Patriots, the Raiders, and the Bengals. None of those matchups should terrify you. Now, the problem here is Isaiah Pacheco doesn't really have tremendous weekly upside because, again, this is an offense that relies on Patrick Mahomes and the passing game, and he's not a significant pass catcher. But in these matchups, he should be able to come through in all 3 of them. Maybe you already have a stud RB1 and you're just looking to fill out a solid upside RB2. That should be Isaiah Pacheco. And right now, you might be able to get him for a wide receiver like Courtland Sutton. Coming off a nice game, he's had a nice season. If somebody's deep at running back and needs wide receiver, Sutton could do it. Or maybe a wide receiver like DeAndre Hopkins. I know he's had a couple down games, but he still has the name value. People still think Will Levis could be the answer there. Take advantage of Hopkins' name value and go get Pacheco. And then finally, a running back I've been recommending for weeks, but finally it is time. Jerome Ford is ready to go on a tear. The Browns have the 10th easiest playoff schedule and the 5th easiest remaining schedule for all running backs. And Jerome Ford has been an absolute workhorse. And he's actually been good in fantasy. I don't think people realize how good he's been. He's had 4 games of double-digit PPR points, over 16 PPR points. And over the last 2 games, he's had 37 carries and 7 targets. That is workhorse-type volume. And now with Deshaun Watson out, they're probably just going to lean on this running game even more. And this is an offense that just knows how to run the ball well. Plus, you're not going to need to give up much to get him. If somebody still believes in Calvin Ridley in this Jacksonville offense, I bet you could get Jerome Ford. Same thing if somebody still believes in George Pickens, who's been terrible since Deontay Johnson has come back and this offense has just become super run heavy. If somebody still believes in Pickens, I'll bet you that would be enough to get Jerome Ford. Let's move on to wide receiver now, and this is your last chance probably to go get Davante Adams. He's still an elite wide receiver. He's still great. He's just stuck with Aiden O'Connell. But, in 2 games with Aiden O'Connell, he's had 13 targets, and in those games, he's been okay. So he's still a target monster, and his playoff schedule shouldn't really scare you. He gets Chargers in Week 15. That's fantastic. KC in Week 16, not so great, but then he finishes with the Colts. That's also fantastic. So he's another guy that could come on late, and at least he's getting the target volume, and he's still a fantastic player. And right now, if you have a running back like Joe Mixon, who maybe is your RB3, RB4 type, and you don't need him, and the person with Davante Adams is A, worried, and B, desperate at running back, that could do it. I also think this is a great time to trade away David Montgomery. He came off a nice game here, but we saw Jahmyr Gibbs highly involved. I don't think that changes. David Montgomery starting to look more like touchdown dependent as the year goes on. Go out, get yourself Davante Adams instead. Now, Devonta Smith has been a very frustrating player this year. Yes, he's had some big games, and then he's had some very down games. He's had some games where he had some drops, but he's still a fantastic player. He's still young. He's still in a great offense. But one of the major reasons why I think you have to go get him now is the Dallas Goedert injury. We saw last year in the games where Goedert missed, Devonta Smith was great. I think we see that going forward. We don't know how long Goedert is going to be out, but we got to think he's going to be out at least until the fantasy playoffs, if not longer. If not the whole year, we don't know. And that's going to open things up for Smith. But also, he has the 4th easiest wide receiver schedule. I talked about it with Swift. He gets the Seahawks, the Giants, and the Cardinals to finish in the playoffs. Those are all 3 absolute smash matchups. Now is your time to go get Smith. And you might be able to trade a running back like Tony Pollard for Smith. Both these guys have been disappointing. If somebody still believes in Pollard or needs running back, that could do it. As could a running back like Raheem Mostert. He's still scoring touchdowns. He's still in this Dolphins offense. He's still technically the number 1. People are desperate for running back. Go see if you can flip Mostert for Smith before Achane takes over again. Now, after the Justin Fields injury, we saw DJ Moore go from potential league winner to basically unstartable. But you got to remember, when Justin Fields was playing, DJ Moore was the wide receiver 5 before that injury. He was fantastic with him. It looks like we're going to see Justin Fields this week. And while he may not be great this week, Fields' first game back, eventually as Fields gets healthier, DJ Moore should be back to being great. But because he's been so bad for so many weeks, people aren't valuing him very highly anymore. And then when you look at his playoff schedule, yes, he starts with a tough Week 15 matchup against Cleveland, but then he finishes with Arizona, Atlanta. That should not scare you. So if Fields can get healthy down the stretch, DJ Moore has a chance to smash in the fantasy playoffs. And if you have a running back like Aaron Jones who's frustrating you, very volatile, never know what to get, and you don't need him, maybe you're a deeper running back, go trade him for DJ Moore. You could also trade Brian Robinson for DJ Moore. I know Brian Robinson has had some big games this year, but he's also had some terrible games, and this is still an offense that's very pass heavy. I don't think Brian Robinson is going to continue to do what he's doing, so if I could flip him for a wide receiver like DJ Moore, I'm doing it. Another wide receiver I think you got to go try to get if you are a contending team, you're locked into the playoffs, maybe you're in first, you're in second, and you're just looking for that one last missing piece to turn your team into an absolute monster, is T. Higgins. T. Higgins has been one of the biggest busts this year, even when he's played, obviously missed a lot of games with injury, now dealing with this hamstring injury. Most people are just done with T. Higgins at this point. So again, if you're a team, already have a strong roster, and he just kind of like is the cherry on top, go put out some feeler offers because I don't think it's going to take a lot to get T. Higgins right now. You could probably trade either of the Steelers running backs for T. Higgins right now. Najee Harris has been great since the team's bye. If the team with T. Higgins needs a running back, they might just be willing to take Najee Harris. They might also take Jaylen Warren, who probably has more value than Najee Harris right now because people somehow turn Mike Tomlin having Jaylen Warren introduced with the starters in Week 10 to meaning that Jaylen Warren is now the starter. He's not, but it's still a 50-50. And Jaylen Warren has been good, and he's a guy people have wanted to see break out all season. If you got Jaylen Warren, and he's like your RB4, RB5, just sitting on your bench, go get T. Higgins, wait for him to get healthy. He could take your team over the top. Another wide receiver that's not going to require much to go get, but could also take your team over the top is Marquise Brown. He did not have a great first game with Kyler Murray back. But look, it was Kyler Murray's first game back. It wasn't really a fantastic matchup. You got to think as the season goes on, they're both going to get better. Kyler is going to get better, as will Hollywood Brown. And Hollywood Brown has the third easiest playoff schedule of any wide receiver. He gets the 49ers, which, yes, are a great defense, but they still give up a lot to wide receivers. Then the Bears, that's fantastic. And then the Eagles, who also give up a ton to wide receivers, actually currently giving up the second most points to wide receivers right now. Hollywood Brown could absolutely smash in the fantasy playoffs once Kyler gets healthier and this connection grows. And again, his value is pretty depressed because he hasn't been good for many weeks. Again, I'm going to say maybe a running back like Jaylen Warren, who people love, who people think is going to be the workhorse running back in Pittsburgh, can get you Marquise Brown. Or maybe even a running back like James Cook. He's coming off a nice game. I mean, yeah, he did have that fumble, but he went for over 100 yards. He looks explosive. If somebody's desperate at running back and they're deep at wide receiver, James Cook could do it. I'm also going to suggest you go get Diontae Johnson coming off his first down game in really a long time. It was easily his worst fantasy game in a long time. But this guy's a great wide receiver. He's a target monster. He's the clear number one wide receiver here. He's going to be better rest of the season, almost no doubt about it. Is he going to have tremendous league-winning upside? Probably not. But if you're looking for a high floor, decent upside, wide receiver 3 type to round out your roster, he can get that done. Now, he doesn't have a smash playoff schedule, but he also doesn't have one you should really worry about. So again, if you're looking to fill out your roster, fill in that last wide receiver 3 spot, he'll work. And it's not going to take a lot to get him. In fact, if you have a tight end like Trey McBride, maybe you grab him off waivers for Kelsey's buy or somebody's buy where you already have a stud tight end, I think you could flip McBride straight up for Diontae Johnson. And same thing with a tight end like Jake Ferguson. If you grab Jake Ferguson when your stud tight end had a buy and you've just been holding on to him and you don't need him, go flip him for Diontae Johnson. And then finally, at wide receiver, Zay Flowers started off great, but he's kind of going through a lull here in the middle of the season. But we see this with rookies sometimes, right? The middle of the season, usually the end of their season in college, still the middle of the season in the NFL, they start to hit that kind of rookie wall. They start to slow down. But if they can push through that wall, they usually have a big finish. And Zay Flowers could certainly be that type of player because he has a fantastic playoff schedule. He gets Jacksonville, who's an absolute pass funnel defense, giving up a ton through the air. Then he gets San Francisco, who I already talked about, good on paper, but bad against wide receivers. And then he finishes with the Miami Dolphins, which could be an absolute shootout in Week 17. Zay Flowers is a good player. He's still the clear number one wide receiver here, but his value is pretty much tanked because he's been bad for multiple weeks. And if you could trade a running back like Devin Singletary, who probably just picked up off waivers, who people are now all on because of his big game last week, I would do it. And I would also trade a running back like Gus Edwards, who's been good, still scoring touchdowns. If somebody badly needs running back, Gus Edwards could probably get you flowers. All right, let's finish with some quarterbacks and tight ends in case you need them. And I don't normally recommend ever trading for a quarterback, buying low on a quarterback, but I think this is a great time to buy low on Lamar Jackson. If the player in your league with Lamar Jackson happened to pick up somebody off waivers, like say a Sam Howell, a Jared Goff, a Josh Dobbs, something like that, maybe they're okay parting with Lamar Jackson because he hasn't been great for 3 weeks, but Lamar Jackson is still a fantastic player. He's playing really well. They're going to turn this around. He could truly be a difference maker for your fantasy team. So if you have a wide receiver like DK Metcalf, who's coming off a nice game, but maybe he's like your wide receiver 3 or 4 type because you just have better wide receivers, he might get you Lamar Jackson. And again, maybe a running back like Aaron Jones, been very volatile this year. If he's not your every week starting running back, if you have other options, go see if Aaron Jones can get you Lamar Jackson. Now at tight end, I still really like David Njoku rest of the season. I know Deshaun Watson being out for the season is a little worrisome, but if you look at the first game with Dorian Thompson-Robinson, David Njoku had 7 targets, 6 catches, and 46 yards. And even in the games of PJ Walker, he's seen a lot of targets. I don't think it matters who the quarterback is here because David Njoku is going to get those easy throws. He's still going to get plenty of targets. And he has a 4th easiest playoff schedule for tight ends. So even with Thompson-Robinson or PJ Walker, I think he'll still be great when it matters. But it's not going to take a lot to get him. If you have a wide receiver like Gabe Davis who randomly goes off once every 3 or 4 games and does nothing else, go get David Njoku instead if you need a tight end. Or maybe if you have a running back like Kareem Hunt, he's got the name value, he keeps scoring touchdowns, but he doesn't have a ton of upside. If you need a tight end, go use Kareem Hunt to get Njoku. Also, take a look at all the other great content we have for you to dominate your Week 11 matchup. Who to start, who to sit, who could boom, who to stash now, everything you need to dominate this week and beyond. We got you covered in our playlist right here.